Good evening and welcome to another in the series Why I Write. My name is Totlin Oliver, and it is my pleasure today to bring to you another in the series of Why I Write so that we can have these discussions surrounding creativity, surrounding dreaming, imagining, wondering, just surrounding those things that are natural to us. We like to do why I write. We like to speak with our creatives because it gives us the opportunity to return to the things that we know are absolutely fantastic for us. But we tend to forget that we have these tools at our disposal. And when we forget that we have these tools at our disposal, what happens? Chaos ensues. Once upon a time, when we were younger, children, we didn't have the distraction of all the social media and all the screens. We were busy building toys with our hands, with scrap metal around the house. Now, a big thing is back among so many adults, especially during the season of 2020 with the coronavirus, when folks got back to crafting. Well, writing and reading and dreaming and creating pictures and word art is quite similar. My name is Totlin Oliver, your host, and we have tonight with us our very, very special guests in the person of published authors Frances-Marie Coke, author of When Banana Stains Fade. And we also have with us Lynda Edwards, author of I Am Cuba and Friendship Estate, and a few others. So, look, we're in for a treat this evening as we discuss, does writing get better with age? And look, don't pay any attention to the silver hairs on the screen. Mine is just hidden, okay? Welcome, ladies. Welcome, Linda and Frances-Marie, for joining us here tonight. Your second time together, but this time in a slightly different capacity as we look at discussing the behind the scenes experience of writing and writing over the years and what it produces for us. So, welcome. I'm going to give
Thank
you an
you.
opportunity to make your first remarks, Frances-Marie, and then Linda.
Well, this is really an interesting topic. It has had me thinking since you mentioned it to me. And I think my first comment that I would make is I don't think it is a function of the aging process so much as it is a function of the mixed experiences that we go through as we grow older.
Yes.
I even associated it with life stages because in my early writing years, which were like age 14 to 20, when I was just using writing as an outlet to express whatever I was feeling in a fairly unstructured way because I didn't know I was writing poetry. I was just empty.
Mm.
And during that stage, I think it was really just a means of getting out what was inside me, because that's how I found out what was going on inside me when I saw what I had written or jotted down and thought it might be a poem. So in those early years, I think people are more, and I don't want to generalize too much because it's different for everybody, but for me, I think I was fairly introverted, and writing was an introverted process because I
Mm.
wasn't sharing it. I wasn't writing about other people. I was just writing about what was going on inside me.
Yes.
And then I think with growing older and learning more about what it means to be a person in the world and not just in your own world, my
Yes.
writing began to change. And I wasn't so introverted in my thoughts or in my expressions. I was now thinking of a bigger world,
Mm.
going a little bit outside of myself, very tentatively because I still knew very little about anything.
Mm.
But yes, so that was the first transition I thought about as I thought about the topic. And then adulthood came and all what they call now adulting.
Yes.
came with all these responsibilities, work and family and a bigger picture. And unfortunately, that bigger picture disrupted my little world, took
Mm,
me out of writing because I was now thrown into bigger things, I thought.
right.
I had to be a worker, I had to be eventually a wife and a mother. And that really takes up all of you, or
Yes.
it certainly took up all of me.
Hmm.
So those were the early stages, and then I'll come back and say what I think has happened since.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for that opening. As you talk about writing to express yourself and pouring out in communication, in our communication coaching, that's one of the first things we show people how to do in terms of developing their own voice, to be able to have that intrapersonal experience of communicating with self through writing.
Oh,
Yeah,
so it was permissible then.
very permissible. Linda, welcome. So glad you could be here with us. What are your opening remarks on this topic?
Um, I, that's Frances's experience is really, I think that's generally how most people start writing from childhood and then it progresses through. I was a little bit different in that I came from a family of storytellers, but in the oral tradition, we really didn't write anything down.
Mm.
And then it was only 10 years ago that I sat down and wrote my first book, Redemption Songs. And I found the reason that I even wrote the book was because I had something on my mind and I wanted to get it off my mind.
Mhm.
And I found the experience very cathartic. And it's interesting because when you first approached me about this, I was thinking about it too. And I went back and I looked at the first chapter I ever wrote, which was Redemption Songs, compared it to the one from Friendship Estate and compared it to the one in I Am Cuba. And I think one of the beauties of being a writer is that you can see the progression. You can see yourself getting better. You can see yourself learning the craft, developing your thought process and developing your characters a little bit more. So that's fun. That's a lot of fun for me.
Mhm.
And I enjoy it. But I never really was much of a writer until, I think it comes to you when it comes to you.
Yes. Hmm. Hmm. It's interesting how both your origins are so separate but similar. And what you just described, Linda, shows us how much in our cultural space we almost discount oral tradition as a way of capturing our stories.
Mhm.
And we seem to put on a higher pedestal when you actually use pen and paper, or in nowadays case, our computer, and print it out. Or we can see it on our Kindle or iPad. So it's interesting that the origins are disparate but very similar.
And I wouldn't discount storytelling in my process of writing because I grew up with, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother in the country, and she was a storyteller. And she introduced me to Louise Bennett, put
Mm-hmm.
me on the stage to recite Louise Bennett, much to my horror. But I did it. And she was always telling stories, whether by virtue of her own experience or because she knew all these poems by heart.
Mm-hmm.
She had never seen a daffodil,
Mm-hmm.
but she knew all the thousand daffodils that Wordsworth wrote about. She
Yeah.
taught me that poem on her lap,
Yes.
and she would sing all these songs and folk songs and teach us all these games that involve stories. So the oral tradition is very much a big part of my becoming a writer.
Peter.
And also books, I was a reader under the dining table in the country with my
In
book
bed.
when the world was full of other people, a lot of children around, but I didn't want to be with them so much. I wanted to be reading one of the books that I found on that old bookshelf. They were so old, the books were so old, the pages were yellow and crackling.
Yes, I remember those. And the
Yes,
spine was
yes,
showing that the threads.
Yeah, the
yes.
threads coming out.
The
I
threads
think,
coming out of the spine. Brilliant image, yes.
yeah, yeah.
So I was brought up on books and
Yeah,
stories.
yeah, uh-huh. And I
Again, it was
yeah,
inevitable that I would, be a reader, be an avid reader, and by the way, a kind of a writer.
yeah. Because basically it's just a different timeline for Linda. It's just a different timeline for you,
Well,
Yeah,
Linda.
I had that experience. I mean, my family, like I said, they were storytellers, and to go to a party, you just went from one group telling a story to another group telling a story. And my grandmother was an amazing storyteller as well, and I learned from her. But I think my first experience with storytelling would be the Anansi stories, because
Mm,
I grew up in Mandeville, and those were my bedtime stories.
definitely.
And those were oral. They were never in a
Yeah,
written form.
right.
And I love the Anansi style of writing, in that you tell a story, but you teach a very important
Lesson.
lesson. And
lesson.
I said this to somebody the other day. I think all the life lessons that I've learned came from those Anansi stories.
Mm,
So you had kind of the best of all worlds, the family stories and the
Mhm.
legacy from there, but also the Anansi as well. So it was a rich childhood. And I think, like Francis, I was also an avid reader.
yes.
Anything I could get my hands on,
Hmm.
I read, even stuff I wasn't supposed to at that age.
Oh,
But
yes.
Listen, let's start to discuss that right now. Barbara Hartland, him, her, the joy of you know what. Can't make your mother see that you're reading that, you
The
know?
biggest trouble I got in trouble in that biggest trouble I got into at school was reading um, within my exercise book. I had a
Mhm.
book hidden. And it
Right.
was a banned book. Probably it was Lady Chatterley's Lover, I don't know. But I had that book within a book. Teacher Kate just happened to slip by and found it.
there
And then,
used to be a bookstore in Kingston, you see. I'll it, I'll remember it till the day that I die. Right. I'm directionally challenged, so I can't tell you. I see it in my mind, but I can't tell you where it was. But right in the heart of Kingston. I think coming down Constant Spring Road before you got to the mall. It was on the right hand side, and it was a used bookstore. You had to know it was there. And man, they had some of the raciest books you could ever find. I was in there every week.
we read all kinds of good, bad,
Everything
and
you could
different.
find, you got your hands on.
Yeah.
I think that was my first experience with, something other than required reading or approved
Mhm.
reading.
We
Yes.
would find them wherever they were.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were wherever we found them.
Yep.
You know? They were more, and once you're curious, you are gonna pick up those books.
And
You
then you would tell somebody else about it and pass
No,
it
man, not
on.
me. Mm-mm.
You wouldn't? You kept it to yourself?
Get double beaten for that.
Oh
No.
no, I wasn't caught at home. I was caught at school.
I went to
Because
St.
there were no
Andrews.
bad books in the house in the country.
Well,
no,
I
There
went
were
to
only a
St.
couple.
Andrews, and Miss Rita was the principal, headmistress, and you couldn't get anything past her, boy.
That's her, yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Who remembers those religious books where you saw the hand of God, the supposed hand of God, reaching out from the sky?
Oh yes, to catch you, to
Mhm.
Yes,
pull you up out of
right.
trouble.
And then the images of Noah and the ark, because those were very strong picture books
Mm-hmm.
back in the day.
Yep.
So where we didn't have the distraction of all the hi-fi technology that we now have, we were, leaning towards books. And even for those persons, those children, those young people who didn't necessarily like to read books without pictures, there were always comic books.
Comic books, oh yes.
Yeah.
We
You know,
also grew up on comic books, yes.
yes,
I tell parents who worry about children only reading comics, I said, let them read comics. It's better than not reading.
yes, yes, indeed. Because this is where the imagination starts to grow. This is
Mhm.
where, you know, they, as Linda just mentioned, we learn how to solve life problems by some of these hypothetical stories that we
Mhm.
do come across. You know,
Right.
I also asked the question whether or not age, if writing becomes better with age. What my offering to this discussion would be something like, as I was mentioning off air before we came live, that the recently published poem I had in an anthology, in the North Carolina Anthology of Poems for 2025, is something I wrote all the way back in 1984. And I wondered whether or not, if I set my mind to it now, if I could write those kinds of stories again. And like you, Frances, I was writing to get things off my mind, to describe some feelings that I hadn't even read anywhere else at that point, you know? I said, let me write this. Let me write. It was a story about a heartthrob and what happens and how you can't talk when you see the guy, and your tongue dry.
Dry, yes.
But I wrote about that experience, and there have been several other experiences that I have written about too. Things like circus, things about carnival, things about perception and death, all that kind of stuff. Now, I asked myself the question, now that I've become an adult, whether or not I would have the time to formulate those ideas in such a way again, you know?
I don't know if it's getting it means getting better. I think you get more aware of the difference between what is considered good writing and what you wrote earlier on. I don't know if it's necessarily better,
Mm,
but in my own case, for example, they say all good writing is about love or death. So I
mm,
thought about a couple of things I've written about love and death. And I found a poem that I wrote, I think when I was about between mid-20s, going up to 30, and it was about love. I was very much in love.
mm,
And then I saw another poem that I wrote later on, much, much, maybe 30 years later. See how old I am. And it's complete, it's two different perceptions of what love means. And
mm.
that brought it home to me. I'm not saying one is better than the other.
Mhm, mhm.
And maybe you would detect, if I'm allowed to read it, a piece
Yes.
of each. You would detect, you can tell me when, you would detect whether there's a different, not necessarily better or not good, but a different perception of what love really means.
Yes. I would love to hear that so we can further on build on that discussion. Because one of the things I really want to say is that you mentioned earlier that when adulting started, you're looking after your family, you're working, and so on. And you felt like your creativity in that area of your life came to a halt.
Yes,
It didn't really come to a halt, it went dormant.
it went dormant. Yes,
While you're soaking up these experiences that were laying in wait
yes.
to come from hibernation. So, with that song, let us hear what you want to share with us. As
Okay, so I'm going to read a little piece of a poem called After the Echo. And because I have to put on my glasses, so excuse me. Okay, so this is the early poem about love, one of many. Many went into the waste bin, but this one is called After the Echo, and it goes, I loved you once when all I knew was passion, and all the stars in heaven shone for you. But stars will fall, and suns will rise too soon, for night and day are two sides of one moon. I loved you once when loving meant possession, vain promises that two would be as one. But being one meant losing one. So love and loss were two beats of one heart. The dance of disenchantment slows. The echo dies with all that might have been. Now I love you from the safety of a distance, that space and time inserted in our lives, freeing me to paint you in the colors of a dream. I cannot lose you now. You are not here. So that's an early love poem. And you can see it's fairly introverted. It's about me. And then later on, I wrote another poem about love, which is much later on. And it says, love, I have known you in the improbable, gentle eyes of a boy who revved his bike along the summer shore, spraying me with sand, not knowing I was there. I have felt you in the tremor of my untried lips, pressed against his urgent mouth. Later in September, the leaves turning brown, the sliver of an early moon paused like a comma in the sky. Our hairs on end, you uncovered me against the twilight wind, and your fingers closed round my trembling heart. I've heard you in forbidden whispers, shared with someone else on borrowed time. Love, I have tasted your bitter and your sweet, watching too many backs recede. You have left me on fire, shimmering in your glow, whimpering in the embers when someone else had to go. I've searched for you among the early blossoms, remembering to shield myself from thorns. And yes, I've turned from you, weary of the dried petals that always followed you. You guys can tell me if you hear any difference between the early one and the later one. I felt a difference as I reread them.
There's definitely a progression from the young girl first falling in love to the woman who has to contend with the results of love.
And lost love, yes.
Yes, and, and the angst of love.
Right. So I think it's more like, okay, so at one stage of your life, you're writing from a limited perspective.
Yes.
And later on, you're writing from a perspective which has been broadened and tested and tried and probably found wanting, and have a different view of the same subject, which is love.
For me, I hear certainly in the second piece a lot of texture, a lot of texture, a lot of coloration, a lot of owning the deep rigors of what this Romeo and Juliet emotion feels like, running through your heart from shoulder to shoulder, down your navel string, coming up your throat, through your head top.
Right out. And then it just spills out. Yeah.
Yes.
More considered, I think. It's more considered rather than the early one, which is like an overflowing, this passionate thing that we call.
And you're also making the other person in the first one, the other in that scenario, the object of your affection. Yeah, that's the object of your affection, of your desire.
Right.
Our second piece, we hear a maturity of a woman coming to understand what's going on in herself.
Right. Yeah.
And allowing yourself the permission to feel so many diverse feelings and, emotions. Because we don't talk about them things in Jamaica amongst one another. We don't. Lord me there, if he gone, he gone. And we
Yes.
the next subject,
And that's an escape, That's just escape the pain. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We belittle it because it's not good to admit pain.
Yes.
Not where how we were brought up. Nowadays, pain can be said and told to everybody, I guess.
Because we realize that it causes all of these horrible things in our body, and the trauma is not released. Whether people respond to it by drinking a lot or whatever they do.
Whatever they do to cope,
whatever coping skills. So definitely, it's less of does your writing get better with age, and more of how much more of yourself do you know as time passes, Because
Mhm.
what if, let me ask you this hypothetical question. What if you did stuff right after that first poem? What if, would it
Maybe I
mean,
would never have been able to experience that growth. But I should also mention that once I got back into writing after the hustle of that distraction called life,
yes,
I became more serious about writing and I sought numerous opportunities to learn to write.
right.
Workshops, seminars, courses,
Mhm.
handbooks, everything I could put my hand on, because now I decided I'm going to make time.
Yes.
I had lost all my writing in a fire when I
Oh,
lost everything. So I was basically starting from scratch. And
from
it took me
scratch.
like maybe 8 years to start writing again.
Mm.
So I guess when I came back to it, I was more committed and I
Ah,
was more committed to learning to do it. And
that's
when
where
they,
it
yeah,
going.
that's why I think I was able to write
Right.
the memoir and the novel
Yes.
so late in life.
Hmm. But look at it though. 10 years ago for you, Linda, you decided that, look, let me take my oral tradition and let us put it in black and white. Let us use the tools of that and put it into black and white. What is your comparative situation to what Frances-Marie just discussed?
I think it's growing older, understanding yourself a little bit more,
Mm.
being able to ask for help when you needed it. I mean, when you're, in your teenage years and you're in your 20s, it's not so easy to ask for help. When you're older and you're a little bit more, you've had some life experiences, the
Hmm.
ups and downs, the shade, the sun.
Hmm.
I think and you have somebody in your life that you trust and who you can say to, I'm struggling. And he will say, well, I mean, the redemption songs came because I was having a series of nightmares. I had suffered several losses, back to back. And my biggest fear was losing my husband. So
Mm.
it was manifesting itself in these horrific nightmares, and I would wake him up. And one day he just rolled over and he said, why don't you just write it down? Just get it off your chest. And the next thing I knew, the first chapter of Redemption Songs was born. And you can see that from Redemption Song, the first chapter. You can see the pain that I had to release because I mean it was clawing at me. It was stopping everything. And
Mm.
I'll read it to you. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. His skin turned from a healthy tan to a dry gray and then to a brittle yellow. He lost weight and his energy level plummeted. The warm touch that could always ignite a fire in me had turned cold and frail. Thomas had slowly faded away. I'd been powerless to stop it. He was only 43 when he died, and I still couldn't believe fate had dealt us such a cruel blow. My mind rebelled against the reality that he was no longer with me, rebelled against the notion that I would no longer see him, touch him, feel him, or breathe him in. He was my life, and just like that, he died. I couldn't face my life without him. I had no idea how hard it would be to lose the one person put on this earth just for me. Every bone in my body hurt. It was impossible to smile again, and just getting up in the morning required more energy than I could summon. Sleep was my only respite because he was always there smiling at me, making love to me, calling me his baby girl. Thomas was alive in my dreams, and so was I. So,
That's in the depths of the pain.
yes, yes, but that's what I had to get off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Was
really
the
what,
release.
yes, I had to get it off. And
Very cathartic.
yeah,
Yes.
and then that chapter was born. And then, as life has a way of just throwing things at you, I had written redemption songs thinking, boy, it would just be for family and friends. And I enjoyed getting the calls. I know who you're talking about there. I know who that really is. I enjoyed it. It was a way to connect. But then it did very well as a self-published book. So I went on to do the second book. I wrote the second book within a year and published it, and it still had that same angst to it, but no, it was a more mature side, because what had happened was I'd connected back with my family.
Mm.
The first chapter of Friendship's Estate came from a will that my brother had found from a great granduncle of mine in Jamaica, and that started a passion. From there, all my next two books are basically talking about that heritage and the importance of keeping that heritage alive, keeping those ancestors with us. But Friendship Estate came along, and the first chapter of that is also, the same kind of angst. And Lyndon Holborn, master of Friendship Estate, lay on his deathbed on the 19th of August in the year of our Lord 1786. Dawn was creeping over the mountains and would soon light up the Caribbean Sea. He could see the waves from his bed and tried to concentrate on breathing in with each incoming wave and out as it kissed the sandy shore and turned back toward the pull of the sea. He knew he was dying, but he still had things to do before he closed his eyes forever. His second wife was much younger than he was. He had set aside his English wife and 3 children when he met her, sent them back to England with enough money and a promise that he would never hear from them again. As the ship sailed out of the Jamaican harbor, he took for his wife the love of his life, Anne Beauchamp. She was born in Haiti, and he met her there when he traveled to her father's estate to buy slaves. Her father was a Basque prince from the Kingdom of Navarre. The small principality occupied lands on either side of the Western Pyrenees, along the Atlantic Ocean between Spain and France. So there's a progression from the first to the second. I think you can see that the writing gets better. It becomes even more personal, because now I'm writing about my ancestor who took a wife much younger than he was and agonized about how he was going to leave this estate to her. So there's a progression there that I think comes from not only wanting to connect, understanding that feeling of belonging that you had as a child, you want to connect back with again as you get older. But those people that made you feel that are no longer there. So the only way you can connect back to them is by telling their stories.
Very clear. That's really very clear. So although the first one was cathartic, the other one was also cathartic, but in a completely different way, because you were not so personally wounded
No.
by this death or this
No.
history that you were writing about. Yeah.
Yeah, that was more reaching out to connect.
Right.
That feeling that if I ever lost my husband, who would be there for me? And that feeling to just, you have to reconnect. You have to go back.
Because there are others for you.
Yes.
Yes.
Although at first you would not know that. You
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah, because as you say in your poem, when you're first in love, that's it. There's nothing else.
Nothing else.
There's
Not
nothing
even
else.
you.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there. That's your life.
Right.
And then as time progresses and you have losses and you realize that you need more.
Yes. I think the true test of all of this, of any of this, is as you continue to live. It's not even so much as you age, but as you continue to live and have extensive experiences. Because some people can live for 70 years and they just sit like a bump on a log.
Same
No
experience over and over again.
Same experience, 70 years past. Same experience. But you can have somebody else who lives a shorter set of years and they live an even much fuller life.
So it's more than maybe we're saying it's not so much the years, it's what you experience through the years and
Right.
what meaning you make of your experience.
Yes.
Because a lot of times people experience many things, but there's no time or there's no inclination to make meaning out of it.
It. No time for reflection,
Reflection, right,
time for examination,
right,
time for reorientation,
right.
you know,
None
no,
of that, no reflection
no
and
reflection. So there's no expansion. As you
mhm,
both read your works, what comes to me is that writing indeed is psychiatry. Writing is psychology, you know? Writing is any ology you want it to be.
right.
I mean, for you, Lynda, having those terrible nightmares, it's almost like in writing, and I really do love the redemption songs and how it continues and the characters that come into play. I literally walk into an aura of a time in Jamaica when I feel that. I feel everything in that novel as I read, and pretty much similar to what I have gleaned from When Banana Stains Fate, you know, it is what it does, it captures a spirit, for want of a better word. It captures the soul of an energy, of a whether it is a familial tie or it is a social cultural tie, whatever it is, the writing captures something that is almost indiscriminate. But when your reader reads your words, whether it is in poetry or in prose, in stories, short novels, whatever, they get transported to
Mhm.
so where they may not have the tools to express as you have, whether in your writing one or you're writing 29, you have provided a framework, because there's this relationship between you as a writer and myself as the reader, or our readers reading your works or hearing your works read, because we do need to take those time travels at times. I know I took a lot of time travels with reading, and I have found it very refreshing, very insightful. It's very darling to my heart, these works, and how we take time to put our hands on it. We take the time to put our hands on it. That is very critical. Let me just check. Or yes, hi Canute, thank you so much for watching. Canute has tuned in, and let me just see some of the comments that are going here. um Ken Damali says it's amazing to review past writings and wonder to yourself, did I write that? That's true too. The
That's very true.
yes.
It depends on the tone of voice. You could say, did I write that? With
Yes.
admiration, or did I write that? With a kind of disowning it.
Yes,
Yeah. And,
um
and if you're growing and you look back, well, certainly I believe, I mean, growing as a writer causes you to look back at early work and say, uh-oh, I could have done better with that one. But
mm,
it's gone, so it doesn't really matter.
yes, but it is a part of the track that took you to here. It is one of those
Exactly.
steps that took you to here. you
Right.
know one of our comments, I had a comment when I posted about our discussion tonight, from one lady, an author herself, Teresa Wright. And she made a very interesting comment. And I said, I have to share it in this discussion live when I saw it here tonight. So I just want to find that comment and share about it. Let's see if we can find it right here. Sometimes these things like to be lost on your screen, and you cannot find the thing that you want when you want it.
Oh, let me see if I can help you find it.
It was from Teresa, and she made a very, very powerful statement. I know that when I started to write, I didn't want anybody to hear my writings. I was very self conscious. I didn't want anybody to hear my writings because I didn't want it to be critiqued. And I didn't know if it was going to be good enough for public consumption, you know. Um I didn't know. So I didn't want to mess around with it and share it with anybody and then I get turned off. But what I hear from both of you ladies is this inner commitment and dedication to pouring out through your writing. For you, Frances-Marie, you said, let me go and learn everything I can do about writing. And for you, Lynda, it is the passion about learning about your family. And then when you tie both of those things together, you get a work that would have left your world all the poorer if you did not do these writings, you know?
Well, I think that's quite a statement. I mean, I don't know if the I don't know if the world would agree with you on that one, but
It's so hard to please many people. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And it's very hard to get past all the noise that's out there
Mhm.
to have your works, really resonate with people as they've resonated with you. So I think if you're sitting down to write a #1 bestseller, don't bother.
Or is
I mean,
that? In fact, I think at some point you have to say, I have a story to tell and I'm going to tell this story. My characters in When Banana Stains Fade would not come out of my head until I started writing. And if I stopped, they came back into my head. The book took a long time to write. It was difficult to write because it was agonizing in parts. But the fact is, I could not have written that book any younger than what I did.
Ah.
I could not have written that book early on. For example, if I had written a story about the young heroine, Zara, who was 26 at the beginning of the book, I would have had the perspective. If I had been 30 or, early 30s, I would have had her perspective. Because I wrote it when I did, I had her perspective from my memory of being a rebellious teenager in love. I had the perspective of her mother because I have been a mother with a teenager rebelling in the name of love. And I had the perspective of her grandmother because I am a grandmother. So, I had to be at the place in my life where I was when I wrote that book. It could not have been done earlier. And in that book also, I was able to do the research to take me back to Jamaica, 1900s, in order to build the story from that point on, even though the book didn't start there. It went there and it came back. So
Yeah.
it was a long span of years. And I would not have had the time or maybe the inclination to do all that research because earlier in my life, writing was something that seemed to come naturally. I
Right.
didn't have to work with looking up research and, it would have been tedious at the time, but I had to do it at the stage when I could. So I know that I had to be at that stage in order to write the book.
you
Yes.
started the conversation with us, Tatlin, by mentioning what Marlon James had said to you about he wants to write into his 60s, 70s, 80s. And I've been thinking about that because what Frances says is very, very important. As a writer, when we were taught to write in school, you were always taught write what you know, write what you know, write what you know, right? And you don't know anything at 19, 20, whatever, right? And
Yes.
Frances's explanation of how and the process with which she came to write that book is probably the masterclass explanation on how to write a book, right? You have to take the experiences from every decade and stack them on top one another to build the proper story. And I think somebody like Marlon James, who has a gift, somebody like Kai Miller, who has a gift, their stories will always keep coming. Will they be the same perspective? Will they be the same topics? Time will tell. But I think what will happen is as a storyteller, as you go through what life has laid out for you, the stories will come.
Mm-hmm.
Your perspectives will change. Your stories will get deeper. They will have more and more layers. And I think that is the beauty of writing.
Mm-hmm.
You get better the more you do it.
Well,
Yeah.
like everything else, practice, practice
Yeah.
is necessary. And I think when I was younger, and working and bringing up a family and all those things and having social and all kinds of responsibilities, I didn't have enough time or focus to do what I've been able to do since that time. And maybe the distance in time also gives you a distance from the experiences that you can look at it from a more objective standpoint, even though you're still immersed in the field. Like in my teaching book, the years I spent teaching at Kingston College, I had to wait until I was ready to write it, and it took a very long time to be ready. But I always knew I was going to write about that experience. I just didn't know when or how.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did start to write it, it came fairly easily because I had treasured the experiences so much that they were living within me.
Yes.
So when I was ready to put them on the paper or on the screen, they were ready to come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't think I could have done it earlier.
but that's exactly the point. I mean, there's a season for all things.
Yes.
There you go with the philosophy.
Yes, yes, yes.
There's a season and a time for all things. And I think as a writer, that's your guide. That is definitely your spirit guide, because I started 𝑖𝑎m_𝑐𝑢BA in 2004. And exactly what Frances said happened to me. Life got in the way. You become an adult with adult responsibilities. And writing is not an adult responsibility unless it's paying the bills, which it wasn't.
Right.
So when I went back to it after Redemption Songs, and it wasn't coming at all. Just I couldn't force it. Nothing was happening. So I wrote Friendship Estate. And I think what Frances said is very, very pertinent, and I've never realized it till right now. 𝑖𝑎m_𝑐𝑢BA came when it was supposed to, because the research that I needed to do, I taught myself to do with Friendship Estate. The research that I need for 𝑖𝑎m_𝑐𝑢BA, I was ready to do because I had had the experience of writing 2 books. So if I had written 𝑖𝑎m_𝑐𝑢BA in 2004, it probably would have been crap.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas this book is the book I was meant to write.
Right.
And that's something that we have to realize as writers, to give yourself some grace.
Yes.
That's hard to do, yes.
It's very, very hard to do. And as a writer, it's impossible because, as you say, Frances, these characters live in your head.
Mm-hmm.
They wake you up. I've had 2 experiences with the book that I'm writing right now. And to be fair, a good friend of mine, Dale Mafood, came up for the weekend, and his wife, Janet, who is actually my editor. And just being with other creatives, the juices start flowing. 5 o'clock every morning, Frances. The muses woke me up.
I can relate to that, yes. They
Right?
nag you. They are nagging.
Right?
Yes.
So you jump out of bed, you sneak into the office, start writing notes and writing this, and all the things that you were stuck on, all of a sudden the path becomes clear.
Yeah.
So
Readiness. Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, the readiness is all.
there you
But
go.
as I get older, sometimes the urgency to write and the readiness to write don't coincide. Because as I get older, I realize I have far less time to write if I'm going to write anything else. So I feel like I have to write everything now, which I probably do, but I can't because the muse is sleeping.
Well, I tell you, my suggestion, Frances, get yourself into a creative space and they will just come knocking at the door. There's a new place that has opened up here in Orlando called Cap Village. and it's a place for creatives to basically go. And I mean, Saturday, I couldn't sit still. We were there for 2 hours. Dale and Janet were here, and the mind, 5 o'clock Saturday morning, 5 o'clock Sunday morning. It's like, Jesus, it's Sunday morning, let me sleep.
That's a good place to be,
Yes,
mentally,
yes,
where you have to get up and write. Yes, yes, yes.
yeah. You know, you know, the reason my soul desired for us to have this discussion is because I don't think age matters much when you are a writer. So if you're a writer at 5 years old, 6 years old, 60 years old, 78 years old, 101 years old, your age doesn't matter, especially if you're just starting. And I think that that's the takeaway I would want anyone listening to this conversation to really take away. You know, it's really less about age and more about the time you give yourself to grow from stage to stage. Are you going to be somebody who started writing something 10 years ago, throw it away, and just never return to it? Maybe on hearing this conversation, you did do that and you decide, you know what?
Pick it
Maybe
up.
yeah, let me go pick it up back. In fact, that happened with one of my writers who I edited her children's books. She had about 4 or 5 children's books unedited that she wrote over 10 years ago, storybooks. And she was reminded of the storybooks she had sitting in her email, unpublished, unedited, with no air or light around them. She took it on. She says, I'd like for you to edit this book for me. And I'm just saying, I'm thinking, okay, what does she have? How much editing do I have to? And it was literally a ready done book. It was ready done with just a few tweaks here and there, because she has grown as a person from the first time she wrote it 10 years ago to now. Some of her philosophies have changed, even in a children's book.
Mm-hmm.
Even in because what are the stories we're telling our children today as opposed to back when?
The
You know,
world has changed.
the world
It's
has changed.
constantly changing.
It's constantly changing. So it is about us really tapping in to the artistic center that we have and trusting it. As Teresa says, she says, yes, I believe it has in for me if writing gets better with age. Teresa says, in my early stages of writing, I wrote for the reader. I wanted praise, so I wrote mechanical by the book. I used expansive words and wrote what I thought was trendy. One day, a friend said, I was a very good writer, but she had to use a dictionary.
Dictionary.
Wow.
I saw that comment and I thought, my God, how brilliant.
Yeah, and she says,
That's a beautiful insight. I mean, that could move her to do something tomorrow.
yes, and she said, after reading some of her early work, she understood the importance of trusting my gut and writing from my heart.
Most books, I think when most writers sit down to write their very first book, they're writing for themselves. They're testing to see if they can do it, number one.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a story inside them,
Mm-hmm.
if it resonates with themselves, will it resonate with somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that we don't give ourselves enough time to do.
Yes.
To get that first book down, to get it to a point where it feels right. You can finish it and say, you know what, I'm a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
or I have written a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. That begs the question of me. The question comes up into my mind. Why is it that we suffer so much with this imposter syndrome when it comes on to writing? And you just said it, we don't trust ourselves enough. And I read somewhere else recently that somebody said, you don't have writer's block. You just have whatever the word was. But just the very first part of the sentence that says you don't have writer's block, it means something else is going on
Mm-hmm.
that you need to pay attention to. to get to that thing that you need to do.
Well, I don't, writer's block, that's a strange dichotomy, because what is the block? Is the story not coming? If the
Mm,
story is not coming, it's not a story, right? Is it that you cannot write a story because you don't have the idea for a story? That's
mm,
not a block. That's you needing to go and find out and do a little bit more research
yes.
and find what it is you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this book that I'm currently writing, I had the very last line of the book before I wrote down one word.
Mm,
And I built the entire story
To
based
lead
on
to
that
that
very
line.
last line.
mm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, we have to do what works for us,
but this is the whole point, and you never know what's going to work. I've never done that before.
Yeah.
In 3 published books, one sitting on my desktop, 2 more that I'm working on. I've never had the situation where the first thing I had was the last line.
Yeah. And you know
I
what?
think I don't know if we should call it writer's block, but I do know there are things that block people from writing. For
Mm,
me right now, I believe one of the things that would block me is the difficulties I have encountered getting the books into the hands of people
mm,
who probably want to read it, but just have not found a way to get it. Or the whole idea that if you don't sell the book within the first year, you might as well forget about it.
and I don't believe that. I really don't believe that because so many Johnny come lately books, not that they're not good. They started off in the secrecy of the annals of time, and then suddenly out of nowhere, somebody republishes them. And they
That
become
happens, yes. But the whole publishing world, it's like a turnoff. It can be a turnoff, let me put it that way. And then the fact that in publishing nowadays, most publishers expect you as the writer to market the book diligently.
yes.
A writer may not necessarily be a marketer.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't see myself as a marketer. And although I've learned an immense amount of stuff about marketing the book, it doesn't come naturally to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had to fight and learn. And I think that is a turnoff for people who hear, for example, that if you don't have an agent, you have no chance of getting published.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get a bestseller, it's not worth writing the book.
Which is
The noise that you spoke of earlier, there's a lot of noise that can block people from even trying to write. And especially people who are going to write something for the first time.
mm-hmm.
The noise is telling you don't even bother to try,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're just going to write it for your family and a few friends. Because the fact is that most books do not sell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's fine to write a book, satisfy yourself with writing it. But if you think about whether it's going to be a bestseller, as you said earlier, it will be a turnoff.
Mm-hmm.
It will
Mm-hmm.
definitely be a turnoff.
Yeah, if you sit down to write a bestseller, you're going to be very disappointed.
I think so, yes.
And that's sad because you probably are missing out on an opportunity to write something really good that may be a bestseller down the line. This whole thing about paying dues is a very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very real thing, especially in writing. And you have to have that experience. I mean, one of my favorite writers is John Grisham. I love the way he writes. Um, it's fabulous. I wish I could write like that. And he tells the story of how long it took him to get published for his first book, you know, and then the demands to keep having the bestsellers one right after the one right after. So, and he'll be the first person to tell you that he's lost his way a couple of times.
I've
You
read
can
that,
see it in the
yes.
books. You can see it in the books. They're not as good as the first ones or, the first 10. Because maybe has run out of stuff to talk about. I don't know. right?
I wouldn't mind writing an 11th book that was as good as the first 10.
Well, this is the
That would
whole
give me a
point.
lot of happiness.
That's the whole point. But would it though, Francis? And that's the question. When you've come to a point where your writing is at a certain standard, and then you dip,
You must feel terrible. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a good feeling.
It's your own
would
personal
imagine.
standard. It's not what other people are saying.
This
So
is
if
the
you
whole
fall
point.
below your own standard, that's painful.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, again, time will be able to tell you.
Yeah.
Because it's not until you've written the 11th book
This is
that
true.
it's not as good as the 9th or the
And it
10th.
might be the best of all.
This is the whole point.
It's just, you just don't know how a book will land.
You don't.
That's what I believe anyway.
Yeah.
So here's my take on all of this. One of the reasons, and I've told the story several times, why I began this Why I Write platform is that when the idea for a book came to me back in 2011 or so, and I was looking at publishing a book on the occasion of Jamaica's 50th anniversary of independence. And when the thought first came to me, I was actually lying down at a spa having a body massage when the idea popped in my mind. I was like, me write a book? I'm not gonna write no book. For what? What? And I doubted the fact that I could ever write a book. Now, why did I doubt the fact when I have already been writing for umpteen of years in different scenarios, and I've been writing for public consumption? You're writing for news, you're writing for promos, you're writing for nationwide, you're writing speeches for people to speak at important events, you're emceeing, you're writing, you're writing, you're writing. Why did I doubt that I could write? It is a mindset. And we have to remember that no matter what the book market looks or feels like, here's what I know for sure. Books are not going to go out of style anytime soon. That's the first thing. Here's what I know for sure. If you sell 1,000 of your books, you have sold a lot. Here's what I know for sure, that when you do your research, as you both have, as I had to do for that very first book I put out, I went down to the Gleaner archives and I sat in that big archivy place with those huge old newspapers, and I went through them from 1962 through to that present time. And I can tell you this much. It is a great feat because you never know who's going to come take up that book that you've written, turn it into a film. You never know. 5 years later, 20 years later, 25 years later. So it's never a waste. And everybody who reads that book is going to find value in that book. So I think the message we want to leave here tonight is keep writing. It doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter even what the market looks like. Whoever knew that hand sanitizer would become a bestseller in 2020? Did you know? I didn't know.
It's the COVID.
Right.
Toilet paper would be scarce.
Would be scarce. Nobody knows what tomorrow may bring.
Nobody knows what tomorrow brings. So I have some comments here that says, this is inspiring. Thank you. Thank you, talking to you and your guests. Thank you so much. Camille from Canada. She's in Canada. Hi, Camille, one of our former Wire Right guests. She writes, thanks for an inspiring conversation. Whenever I write spontaneously, I find that people respond more favorably than when I try too hard to make the point. She says, I love the encouragement here. Ladies, this has been wonderful. I didn't get to hear any reading from When Banana Stains Fade. Maybe we can close with that. We can definitely close with that, Frances-Marie.
Yes,
So
one of the things that I realized that I have also learned to write differently, I'm not saying better, but write differently about is death. So I looked back at a poem about death, an early poem, and the emphasis was on the uncertainty and the discomfort of knowing that somebody has died. And one line of it says, who knows if souls can survive the fire? That means cremation, because the person I was thinking of was cremated. And then when I wrote about death in When Banana Stains Fade, a few people said that was the best passage in the book. So maybe I'll share that. This is the death of the grandmother and the one who has gone through all the trouble with the daughter and the granddaughter, and has also gone through her own troubles. So this is the last evening of her life. Outside her window, golden dots smothered the anthers of the Easter lilies, their white petals deepening to yellow and pale green on the inside. It was the hour when the first peep of sunlight nudged the day's reluctant eyes open. The dew beads glistened in the grass, and the bird songs filled the air. Esther shouted across the space between their rooms, "Morning, Zara, you up yet?" "Getting there," came a voice still filled with sleep. Mother and daughter drifted into the corridor in the same moment. Together they sensed the unusual hush. Naomi's tape recorder was silent. Naomi had awakened just past midnight, this time sensing the arrival of the visitor, stealing through the night like Nicodemus. Dying, she understood in those moments, was a quiet drifting, fading notes of her favorite hymn, no thundering roar, but a feathery murmur, like the flutter of an infant's eyelids, a breathy recital of Psalm 61, and she had gathered herself into readiness, certain and unafraid. Zara cupped the wrinkle-free face between her palms, wincing at its coldness as a whimper escaped. Esther stretched out her mother's elegant keyboard fingers and folded them into her own. "You're sure?" Esther asked, surprised at Zara's insistence. "Yes, definitely," she said.
Such detailed finality, down to Psalm 61.
Beautiful.
Very punctuated, most punctuated. And to wrap, you have a contribution, Linda. I see you have I Am Cuba open.
I have I Am Cuba open, and I did promise you that when it was done, I would at least read you the very first chapter. So this is a prologue, Cuba 1959. How could the worst day of my life look so much like the best day of my life? Jose Vasquez stood on the veranda. A bitter ache settled in his chest as the memory of his wedding day flooded his mind. The sun still poured over the valley, but now it seemed like a cruel reminder of happier times. The wind that had once whistled with joy now hung thick with grief, a reminder of all he had lost. He glanced at his oldest friend, who casually sipped a glass of rum. As Jose sat, the man slid a glass toward him. "I'm truly sorry for your loss," Fidel Castro greeted him. Jose nodded as he put the rum to his lips. "I didn't see you at the church," Jose muttered. "An atheist does not belong in church," Fidel replied sharply. "An atheist?" "Probably," Jose thought to himself. "But now a communist, I hear," Jose retorted. He wasn't so out of touch that he hadn't kept up with his friend's movements. "A communist?" Fidel asked, surprised at the characterization. "I'm a nationalist who is forced to work with communists." Castro's sardonic laugh was harsh. Jose looked at Fidel, skepticism unmistakably etched in his face. "America has crushed Cuba in its embrace, Jose," Fidel responded defensively. "And your answer is to trade American colonialism for Soviet imperialism," Jose shot back. Fidel's sigh was sincere. "I can't allow my people to starve. So I've secured a substantial loan from the Russians to keep Cuba going. But, as with all debts, it will have to be repaid in time. And to do that, I will need your help." "My help? How can I help you?" Jose asked, surprised. "Like it or not, your fate is tied to mine," Fidel answered earnestly, sitting forward in his chair. Jose looked away, but Fidel would not be deterred. "For centuries, men have tried to find the city of Atlantis and the wealth it hides. Thanks to you, Cuba sits on the most historic find the modern world will ever know," Fidel began. but we don't have the knowledge or the technology to unlock its secrets, Jose boldly interrupted. Now we have an ally who does, Fidel glared at Jose. I haven't found Atlantis, Fidel, Jose exclaimed, frustrated. I found a wall covered with a metal that I don't recognize, and I can't figure out what it is. But the Russians can, Fidel interjected, and they can tell us what it's worth. What it's worth? Jose asked suspiciously. 7 million people live in Cuba. They will starve if I don't feed them. Find me Atlantis and I can feed them, Fidel was insistent. Jose shook his head in annoyance. Atlantis consisted of concentric circles of islands, each within its own harbor. I suspect the wall I found surrounded the outermost circle of water, making it the size of London, Jose declared. For all I know, Atlantis is buried in the Caribbean Sea. No one has the technology to find it there. Fidel would not give up. Then let's start with the wall. I'll give you as many men as you need to dig up the sheets of gold. Jose stopped him there. I told you it's not gold. I remember you said it was some kind of golden alloy like copper. Orichalcum. I think it may have the same properties as brass or copper, possibly aluminum, Jose answered. Well, let's find out what it is, Fidel said with a finality, as Jose's heart sank. How? How do you plan on doing that? The wall is on my father's land. Even as Jose said the words, he knew why Fidel was sitting next to him on the day he buried his wife. Are you going to appropriate his land, taking what rightfully belongs to him, to me, to my daughter? Jose, I'm fighting to free Cuba from influences that have controlled us for hundreds of years, Fidel argued. By involving the Russians, you'll only succeed in condemning Cuba to enslavement and allowing yet another imperial power to steal our treasures. Can't you understand that? Jose pleaded. Everything I do is in the best interest of the Cuban people, Fidel raged as he banged his fist on the table. By taking our freedom to choose and stagnating our ability to progress? Don't do this, please. Find another way, Jose entreated. I can no more hurt the people of Cuba than I can hurt myself, Fidel concluded, his voice booming. For I am Cuba, Jose. I am Cuba. You're condemning Cubans to a lifetime of poverty and exile if you keep down this path, Jose warned his friend. But he saw it in Fidel's eyes. His words had no weight, no power. Fidel was convinced that his actions were for the good of the Cuban people. But history wouldn't side with Fidel, and Jose told him as much. Fidel looked at his friend, finished his drink, and clapped him on the shoulder as he stood to leave. History will absolve me, he replied confidently.
Yeah. If you're talking, Francis, your microphone is off.
No, I'm not talking.
Oh, okay.
I was just nodding at what I had heard, the reading.
Listen, somebody writes here on YouTube, a good book is when the reader imagines reading a story about the reader. Listen, you know what, ladies? This conversation could go far and wide. And I think I have concluded, since it was my question, I have concluded that age doesn't really matter in your writing because, as you mentioned, you can keep on writing with age and you find that your 11th book is the worst of all the books you've written.
Indeed.
So I think the message here is when the story comes knocking at your creative heart, then open the door and get to writing, even if it is 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
God muses, please, I beg you.
Whenever it knocks.
You know, well,
the muses will not be ignored.
Listen, I think I'd like to contribute to the widening of the message of, look, these books are here to be read. So come November, we're looking at putting on an online book festival that will showcase. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now I'm speaking. Wow.
So we're looking at just working out some logistics of, putting on the very first ever for Why I Write, a Why I Write book festival, where we get to meet these books in live and in living color, and the authors themselves, and a host of other things. So we're looking to do that in another 2 months in November. So we're keeping fingers crossed that all the logistics go well. And we will be sending out invitations to all our authors across the world that, look, here's a space where we can let everybody know about everybody. And
I think that's amazing. And I've
yes,
told you before that the service that you provide, not only to writers, but more importantly to readers, is
yes,
something that is very important. So I think this is a natural
Outstanding job.
progression, natural progression for you. And I'm
thank you.
there to support you 100%.
Yes,
100%, because you have done so much to support writers and readers and
Mhm.
people who are just interested in creativity.
yeah. Well, I thank you very much, ladies. Is as much as I can say and as much as I can do. I really wish you all the very best as you continue to put your works and your words on paper. Let us not worry about the bestseller. If we have 1 million people gathered across the world, or even 100,000, or even 10,000, even 1,000, that goes a far way in getting our works and our words out. Frances-Marie Coke, author of When Banana Stains Fade. And we have Lynda Edwards, Lynda R. Edwards, author of I Am Cuba, Redemption Songs, and Friendship Estate. You've got to get your hands on these books. Tell somebody about them. And Christmas is coming up. Don't buy anything else but books.
Books. Buy
I
books.
see you. Ladies, thank you so much for being my guest this evening.
Thank
And
you for the
You.
chance,
I
for
wanted
the
to
opportunity.
more chatting, and you've been watching and you enjoy this, please like and share. Share everywhere you know that this wonderful work is going on. So until next week, we have a very interesting program coming up next week, Monday. Make sure you're with us. Have a great week. This is Tauntlin Oliver signing out from Why I Write for today, Monday. Take care and walk good.